Hi, folks, and welcome to Scottish Autism's latest Facebook Live. Really chuffed, delighted to have Ashley Storrie with us today. Welcome, Ashley.
Hello.
Good to see you. And now you're a bit under the weather, I believe.
Yeah, I've got COVID.
Oh my
the sexy kind.
The sexy kind. What are the symptoms of the sexy kind?
Oh, I've got a sniffy nose. I've got a beautifully husky voice. And I keep coughing in people's faces. No, I'm coughing into my hand like a good girl. I'm not coughing on anybody.
Good for you. Good for you. Good for you. It's horrible, isn't it?
It's not the nicest thing in the world, no?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So pleased that you came on today, especially since you're not feeling great. And I'm sure we're going to get loads of people tuning in and loads of questions. But just to kind of get the party started, let's talk a little bit about you and your autistic identity and the route to your diagnosis. Is that okay?
Yeah. It sounds very like official when you say your autistic identity, like it's my superhero identity. I first knew what autism was when, Asperger's, which I don't like that word, but I first knew what Asperger's was when I was in high school and we got taught about the Baden-Cohen test. And I remember when I was maybe 16 or 15 and my teacher had given me the list of questions that are in the Baden-Cohen test. And there was one that like proper stood out to me about not being able to talk on phones. It's such a weird memory, but it was this thing about being anxious about talking on phones. And that was a huge, persistently bad issue in my life, was I was very anxious about talking on phones. But the more I read it, I was like, that's my dad. My dad has all of these issues. And because he grew up in a really weird family where they weren't encouraged to go to school and they were just kind of left to their own devices and they weren't socialized properly, it was just always assumed that he was just poorly socialized and a bit mad. And then when I went home, I read this list to my mum and she was like, oh my God, that's your dad. And I was like, I know. And we went to the GP and the GP was like, no, that makes sense. Like he was like, that's what's happened.
And that's kind of unusual, isn't it? Because sometimes the GPs are not so quick on the uptake. No disrespect to any GPs that are watching.
I think that my dad's GP was at his wit's end of having to deal with my dad and was glad to have some sort of reasoning for him. He got diagnosed super fast. He got sent in for he got great therapy, great help. And as soon as he was diagnosed, it was this like weight had been lifted off the family, because then it was like, oh, that's where a lot of this behaviour is coming from. At the same time, I went to the doctor and I said, I think that I have the same thing that my dad has. I'm a teenager, I have all these bad thoughts and I'm not doing well at school and I don't interact well with people and I don't have friends and I behave in strange ways that I can't fully explain and to try and like fit in, where I'll fabricate nonsense to try and behave in a way that I think other people want me to behave. And then that uncanny valley thing that I think happens to a lot of autistic people, when you're trying to behave in a way that you think is normal and then you overshoot the mark and then you start behaving weird. And I was doing that a lot. And the doctor said, yeah, you probably do, but it will affect your employability if you get diagnosed. So maybe just you're not like your dad, you can hide it. And I was like, oh, okay.
Okay.
And I was encouraged to, and my doctor said, people like you are just like that. And I was just encouraged to kind of not to try and squeeze it down so that I could be employable. And that was, I went to university and I squeezed it down and I tried to fit in, and then I went about my life and I squeezed it down and I tried to fit in. And the more that happened, the more I had all of these other symptoms that weren't being addressed, when I was ticking or I was getting a lot of pain just in my body from trying to hold everything in, and all of that was happening. And then a couple of years ago, I just went, oh, I need somebody to validate this. And I think a lot of women on the autism spectrum are self-diagnosed before they're ever diagnosed by a doctor, because it's so hard to diagnose, especially because my special subject is words and communication, and I'm very good at that, and I'm aware that I'm verbose and I like big words and I like to talk to people, and I can force myself to make eye contact, and I can be performative, and I can do all of those things that people stereotypically don't associate with autism. And so when you say, I think I have autism, people who have a very narrow field of what autism is go, no, you don't, because I just saw you on stage doing comedy. Yeah. And I'm like, you don't know what's going on inside my head, sir. You can't say that. And but then I went to the doctor, and she was just super. She saw me, and she did all the form filling out, and the questionnaires and the stuff where she spoke to my mum and she spoke to my dad, and they spoke about my childhood and the weird things I did. And the more I've listened to them talk, the more I was like, well, that was a red flag. When I was a child and I couldn't touch dirt, and I had to put like plastic bags on my hands to play outside because I didn't want to touch the texture of grass, was upsetting.
Yeah.
That's a red flag. But they were like, if you just thought it was funny because you were walking about with these little plastic bags on your hands. Like,
also just accepted you, I suppose. Yeah. And that I think is that's really cool. And I think that's the thing about the risk of kind of pathologizing everything people do. I think I can hear a lot what you're saying about having to squash it down. Just before you carry on, we've got a lot of people tuning in, and the comments and questions are coming in already, which is brilliant. So if you've got a specific question for Ashley, pop it in the chat and hopefully I'll get to it. But just there's a Tracy McClellan saying, oh, Ashley, you're describing my daughter, 7 years and we still don't have a diagnosis, which is just, such a common thing. Jan is saying, I feel so proud of you. You are refreshingly honest, and we are lucky to have you. Aww. So, and I'm interested in that thing about you're saying about you squashing it down. When did it pop out? Once you'd squashed it down, how did you manage to kind of let off steam?
It would pop out on stage. Sorry. It would pop out on stage, and that was the thing, was all the things that are autistic, like oversharing and information dumping and kind of not having that maybe propriety. Like, people used to say I was shameless when I was a child. Right. My friends would say, oh, she's shameless, because I would just say everything. If anybody asked a question, I would just give the full and honest answer that maybe wasn't polite or restrained, but I would just give everything, because I thought that's what people wanted. When you ask a question, I thought people wanted the full answer, and I couldn't understand why that wasn't the case in real life. And then I went through this period in my 20s of realizing that wasn't what people wanted, so I just went silent. And every time I would socialize with people, I would just not speak, to the point where I think that I got this reputation of being shy. And I thought that was really funny, because I'm like, I'm not shy, I'm just not talking because you are going to look at me funny. And then when I did stand-up comedy, and I would say the very things that people maybe didn't feel comfortable talking about like my body or how I felt or intrusive thoughts or anything, like I literally would say anything that was personal experience, I would say in a way that in real life would be considered shocking, but on stage people would be like, oh, I'd relate to that, that's me. And it made me feel like, well, I have a purpose then. If I can use this thing that makes me unlikable in a social environment to make other people feel better about themselves in a work environment, then that's surely a good thing.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because we've all got this inner narrative that we're kind of damping down. And, that we've got this idea that the world will implode if we're all just kind of honest and open with each other. It's really, really, really strange. And I think you've articulated how, contextual that is. In a social situation, that's, oh, she's, you know, she's a bit extreme and she's shameless. But on a comedy arena, it's hilarious and people really like it. Jan's asking how long it took to get your diagnosis, but sounds like that was quite a long time, over a long period.
Over a long period of time, but then once I got to this specific doctor, she was very she was very sharpish about it, because she saw me and she was like, oh no. And I remember going in and I had like hives on my neck and all up my face, and I thought, what if I'm not? What if I've thought my whole life that, well, for the past like 5 years I've been convinced I'm this one thing, and what if I go in and they say no, you're not? And then what then? What am I then? Because I know that I have all these feelings and all this stuff inside me that's not typical. So then what does that mean? And the fact that I couldn't stop talking about this. Every question they asked me, I was like, yeah, but what if I don't say the right answer? And then they were like, she said, well, that's kind of indicative of the fact that you're obsessive about this thing, is then an indication of. But it was a very weird experience. There was things that happened within the tests that I didn't think were the tests until they explained it. Right. And I don't know how to verbalize that, but there was things where I thought the puzzle was the important bit and I was really focused on doing this puzzle, that I didn't realize it was all the other bits round about it that was the important part. And I think that's kind of a good little micro indication of what autism is you think that thing's the important thing and you miss all of that because you just focus on that thing because you think that that's the most important thing.
Yeah, that is so interesting. There's a lot of people watching. Ashley, we're up at 70. Kay is saying, my 9-year-old daughter gets quite down about having autism sometimes. Is there any advice you could give me to make her feel better about being autistic?
I think that it's important to find what autistic people or anybody who's neurodiverse, to find that thing that's their thing, because I think that's one of the good things about autism and attention deficit is we've all got a thing that's our thing. And once you find that thing, make that so praised and beloved and flourish it that you can say that you're so good at that because you're autistic. That's part of who you are. And you think about all the people who have autism who made the world the magical place it is. Without them, none of this would be possible. I mean, Dan Aykroyd is one of my favourite examples. I know there's like Einstein or whatever, but Ghostbusters wouldn't have that without autism. And come on now.
And how poor a world we would be if that was the case. I think that's a really, it's a really strong message, is and I was struck with what you said about the doctor saw you, and that really resonated with me, because let's just see people for who they are, and their gifts and their talents, and sure there are challenges, but I think that was a lovely way of putting it, and attaching to that thing that makes that person really unique and outstanding is really, really interesting. Ailsa's just saying, you've brightened up a dull November day, you're a breath of fresh air. So lots of love in the room for our Ashley, which is absolutely brilliant.
Oh.
She's also saying she's creasing herself. You're fabulous. You're such a positive role model, which is true, Ashley. Somebody else was saying, Susie is asking if you think it was worth getting the diagnosis.
I think for me it was, because it helped familially and in my friendship circles. There were things that were happening that were just kind of being brushed aside, especially with touch and with especially social burnout, where I was getting to the point where I would want to leave, and people were being, and it wasn't mean because they don't know, but they're like, oh, you're a party pooper. You never stay, you leave the wedding early, you leave the christening early. And I'm like, I emotionally cannot handle any more of this, and I'm going to shut down. And when I shut down, I just go silent again, and I just go like I'm underwater. It's a very strange feeling, and I couldn't articulate that. And being diagnosed and being able to say to people in an unashamed way, I have autism and I can't, or I'm autistic and I can't do this anymore. I'm really grateful that you invited me, but I'm going to have to leave. And being able to have that tool to say, this is who I am. I'm not leaving because you aren't interesting, or I'm not wanting to, I don't want you to touch me, not because I don't like you, but just I don't want to be hugged. And being able to verbally say that and then move away and not have it be a thing where I know my friends are like, oh, Ashley's not hanging out enough, Ashley's not giving enough to the friendship, that they can now go, oh, it's not us, it's not a falling out thing, it's not a emotional thing, it's just a thing, and be okay with it. So being able to have the diagnosis and to have the tools to be able to use that to make my life easier is why I think a diagnosis is a good thing, because autism is like a lot of different needs and a lot of different styles of things, and it's different for everybody. And to be able to work out what your wee sort of circle and needs and not needs are, to be able to then verbalize that to the people in the world, I think is important.
And I guess what that sounds like to me is self-acceptance, and the diagnosis has helped with that. And kind of not feeling you have to apologize for being you. It's part of who you are, it is who you are, and that sort of self-acceptance maybe helps you then engage with others in a way that they can come to accept you and not see it as, oh, she doesn't like this, or oh.
And also make good decisions about when to push myself and when it's not necessary to push myself. Because a lot of my brain wants to stay in a room and sit on my computer and play computer games and read Harry Potter fan fiction and become like one of the wee blobs in Wall-E on a chair, where I've just brought juice when I have to have a thing on my phone that tells me to drink or I don't hydrate, because I will just go into my wee zone and play Sims and read Harry Potter fan fiction, and then I'm happy. And I have to push myself to do all the things that maybe make me anxious or do social things that make me uncomfortable. But I make a decision. I weigh up a pros and cons list, and I add to that list the value of that experience as a pro. So sometimes the value of that experience isn't worth all the cons that will come with it. So I won't do it. But sometimes the Scottish Album of the Year awards, I did not want to go. I did not feel confident. I did not feel comfortable, but I knew that it was going to be a good experience and a learning experience. And I would get to see my friends like Ian Rankin, and I would get to see him in person, and it would be a nice thing to do that. And I would get to take my cousin, and we would get to go out for a bit, and we'd see live music, and it would be all those things weighed up against the negatives of, but I'll have to talk to people, but people will look at me funny, but I'll panic, or I'll sweat, or I'll get a hivey neck. I weigh up those little lists, and then I go based off the pros and cons, and knowing that I have autism or are autistic, knowing that helps me make those decisions based off of, rather than just an unknown feeling, like an actual analytical decision. Does that make sense? I feel like I talked too long about my lists.
No, that makes perfect sense. Lists are life, Ashley. I love a list. I think that makes perfect sense. And actually, it helps you arrive at a place of safety for you. Helps you arrive at a decision that you're comfortable with, that you know you've put yourself consciously in this situation, and so you can kind of work your way through that on that basis. I think that's really useful advice for people that are watching. There's a lot of people who are watching who I think are thinking they could be autistic, or they're experiencing the process of diagnosis with a family member. And I think that all the things you're saying are really going to resonate. And just one of the things you said about everybody's different, Mark's mentioning his son who's 5 today. He's complete opposite of you, Ashley. He's not verbal. but he's very analytical in his play. He has to be precise about everything. And he's hopeful for going to school, and with the right teachers, etc., be able to express his thoughts and feelings. And I think that just, shows the autism is this very, very broad and individually experienced thing. Erica's saying, you talk about pushing yourself at times. How much should we as parents be pushing our kids outside their comfort zones?
I don't know. I'm not a parent, so I don't know how much pushing should be done by a parent. I know there are times where my mum has pushed me into situations that I did not want to be in, and to the point where I have verbalised it. An example is during the Edinburgh Fringe, the booker for Conan O'Brien's show was there, and I didn't want to speak to him. He saw me do comedy. If he wants to book me, he'll book me. I don't want to have to go and schmooze because I don't have that in me. And she was adamant. We still laugh about this to this day, but she was adamant, and she was like, go speak to him, go speak to him. And I walked over, and I was literally said to this man, who's a big TV American man, I said, my mum's making me talk to you, and she's standing over there, so nod and smile for 2 minutes, and then I'm going to walk away. And he said, okay, needless to say, it wasn't on Conan O'Brien, but it was I was so annoyed at her for making me do that. But again, this was pre-diagnosis, so she just thinks I'm being awkward or difficult or I don't know, a million things that aren't what they were. And so I don't know. I think maybe having the times I've really appreciated it is when I've been able to vocalize and discuss with my mum why I don't want to do something and why I should do it. So the lists again. So maybe if you're a parent, just pass that skill on, go through the lists. Why don't you want to do something? Is the value of doing that thing going to be more than you're not wanting to do it? Are you going to regret not doing it? Because that's a big thing as well, is the not doing something and then later feeling overwhelming regret that you didn't push yourself. And maybe just vocally having that discussion with your children might be the best bet. But again, not a parent, never want to be a parent. I don't know how you manage it.
I think that's brilliant advice, and actually it's something I'm going to consider doing myself, because I get myself into a lot of situations where I say yes and I should have said no, work-wise, I mean. So I think that's a good way to go about it. Gordon's saying a few things, but one of the things I want to, Gordon Barr is saying, it's positively uplifting to hear about comedy being an outlet for you. Perhaps being in that unmasked space is the best way for autistic people to be their authentic self, and finding that maybe sweet spot. So we were talking earlier before we come on here about a little bit of work that you did with, I'm sure it was a lot of work, with some autistic people a while back, kind of supporting them to experience that stand-up comedy. That was absolutely magic. And do you think that's an outlet that we should explore further for autistic people?
100%. I worked with the National Autistic Society and in Scotland, and it was with a group of mainly autistic men. There was 2 women. I did tell you about this. One of them hated me, and all of our comedy that we did was about how much she hated me, and I had to be very supportive and be like, no, that's really good that you're verbalizing that, thanks very much. But it was all about how much she disliked me, which is funny because, comedy when it comes from hatred can be hilarious. But there was lots of different people, lots of different spectrum of needs, lots of different spectrum of personality, and quiet people and loud people and nervous people and people who didn't have any nerves and didn't care about anything. And we all kind of worked together, and it was every week for maybe like 3 months, and we just did these routines and we nailed this comedy down. And then we went to the Scottish Parliament and we performed it, and some of it wasn't funny, some of it was. It doesn't really matter. I don't think that's the important part. I think the important part was that we all got to go on stage and we all got to be open. And there was a boy who was a school age boy who spoke in nothing but quotes from films. That's all he spoke in. And he made up a story and he said it on stage, and it was his original content. It wasn't a quote from a film. And this was somebody who was pretty much not verbally communicative in any way, shape, or form, apart from when he was quoting a film. And then he went on stage and he said his story, and it made no sense, but it was his, and it was his content, and he said it, and it was his story, and it was possibly the most uplifting and wonderful thing. And I don't think the people in the audience fully understood how magical that moment was, because it was him having ownership of some form of creativity. But I think everybody in the group knew how amazing this moment was, and we were all just like, what? And it was so great, and I loved that feeling. And I think that there is a sweet spot of being unmasked, and especially as a woman, of being able to be that version of yourself that society's kind of knocked down.
Yeah. And I think, the lesson for me, I was at that and I thought it was brilliant. And I think that there's a high chance that a lot of autistic people don't get to experience things because of the assumptions that people make about them and what they can and can't do. And I thought it was absolutely brilliant and really uplifting, and we should, think more broadly. And in a similar vein, Lauren Ann here is saying she's in touch with us from the Scottish borders, along with 80 other people online just now, which is brilliant. And she's saying she just wants to say that you were superb in Dinosaur. And I loved that. I love that too. And is the acting the kind of same kind of space as the comedy, or does that make you feel differently, or what's with the acting?
Acting is, I think, so different, but there's a very comforting thing in the regimentedness of it, of you're given words to say, you're given a personality to, because if you mask a lot in your life, you're prepared for acting, because it's just getting your brain to go, this is just another mask, and I'm going to put that on, and I'm going to be that person for a little while. And that was being Nina, was just putting on another mask, except it was a mask where I got to unmask, which is a very strange thing to say, but it was all of the things that I kind of hold in, a lot of the hand stimming, and maybe being a bit more, I don't know how to explain it, but there was something very freeing about getting to play that character, because a lot of the things that I don't get to do in my real life that I'm more conscious of, like being on stage, I'm very conscious of stimming on stage. I don't like doing it. I know it distracts the audience, and I feel like it takes away from the comedy in a performative sense, because I know that if I'm doing that while I'm trying to tell a penis joke, it's going to be weird, and people are going to be like, why is she doing that? And it's too hard to explain in a 5-minute set what that's all about.
Sure.
So there was something very liberating about getting to sort of just do all those things and and because the production was very much involved with accessible performers, and being they were very aware of everything. They'd taken time, the production, the director, they'd all taken time to work with Access All Areas, I think, is a theatre company who work with people who have disabilities, and they had taken a lot of time to be very aware of all of that, and that made the process a lot easier.
Which is great, isn't it? That, and again, the other message is that if the society around the autistic individual can make that adjustment and make the step to the middle, it just makes life so much
I think it's just being able to say, hello, I'm autistic, and then instead of, I think that we're all afraid of being wrong, right? We're all afraid of being wrong just now. There's a big culture of don't be wrong and don't make a mistake, and I'd never feel like that. So if somebody says something or does something that is insensitive or makes me feel a bit something, rather than get upset about it, I'll try and just say, oh, don't do that, I don't like that. And I wish we lived in a world where when somebody said that, instead of getting defensive, we just went, oh, okay, sorry. But we live in a world where when somebody says, oh, I don't like that, please don't do that, people get super defensive or aggy about it. And it's a shame, because I think if we, for not just autism, for everybody, if we lived in a world where we could easily say, I don't like that, and then the other person went, oh, okay, I won't do it anymore, how how nice would that be?
Just all rub along without any hassle, couldn't we? Carol Bassett has made a lovely comment. She's the head, my thing keeps jumping about, head teacher. Some of my children in school of autism. I love Ashley's insights into her challenges. They help me to understand my pupils and hopefully allow me to support them better. So another lovely comment. Let's talk a little bit about neurofunky.
Okie dokie.
Because I love that terminology, and I think it goes again to your positivity and your embracing your you know, who you are. How did you come up with that? Neurofunky. Can you remember?
I don't really remember saying that word for the first time, but it was something that I did say a lot, and it was because neurodiverse felt a bit clinical. And I remember the reason that I wanted to make the jumper that said, I'm neurofunky, I don't hug, was we were just coming out of lockdown, and I had this incredible anxiety that people were going to try and hug me, and I did not want to be hugged. And I have this memory burnt in my head of being at the Edinburgh Festival maybe 6 years ago, and this woman who I'd been talking to, who was a very nice woman, she lunged at me and she tried to hug me, and I flinched back, and she was so offended that she's never spoken to me since. She was so she took again me for being unhuggable. And to this day, whenever I see her, she's got such snidey side eye, and she's always like, and I know it's because of that time where she tried to hug me in a nightclub, and I went, so I had this fear when I was coming out of lockdown. I was like, I don't want to be touched, I don't want to be hugged, and I want to be able to say to people, it's not you, it's me. And I wanted to make this jumper, and initially it was just for me. It was just for me to wear, and I have some merch friends, and I was like, can you make me this jumper? And they were like, yeah. And they went, we'll stick it on the website, you can stick it on your Twitter, and if anybody else wants it, we can see if they like it. And I had made like little characters and stuff that I was selling, like badges, and for my Twitch stream. And then I stuck up the neurofunky jumper, and it just resonated, because it's not just autism, it's anything within that sort of neurodiverse umbrella. And I wanted it to be like a more just like I don't know how to say it without coming off as being like, oh, I'm so clever, but I just didn't want it to be as austere. And I think sometimes that thing I was saying where you say, oh, please don't do that, and people get defensive, sometimes a wee bit of honey on that can make people a bit less defensive. And I thought, there's a wee bit of honey. See, it's not all.
I like that, a wee bit of honey. And there's lots of debates about language and terminology, and you know, language is important, terminology is important, but you're owning that as a sort of, you know, you don't want this sort of clinical kind of language around you. And it's really nice, Jan saying she uses neurofunky with her grandson, which is lovely. Anne's also saying, Anne Whitten saying, I'm with you, I don't do hugs, only exceptions are my children and my dad. So quite right, everybody should be setting out their stall about who's allowed to hug and who's not. And I think that it's normal. I say that as a horrible hugger, but over the years I have learned to seek permission. so that's good. So other things, the neurofunky, I love that, and sort of wish I was neurofunky, because I think it's a great term. Maybe we could have a Friends of the Neurofunky t-shirt or something. that would maybe be good. Let's talk about some of the things that really excite and interest you now. I know, because I can see over your shoulder, your Harry Potter owl, and we don't know really, do we know what it is about Harry Potter that catches your eye? Or
I think there is something about a world that has been built that really appeals to people who are neurofunky. I think there is something about a vast world building thing that appeals to us. I think that's why I like Star Trek, which was my first love. Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, anything where there's lots of information and lots of discussion and lots of interest to be had. I think big RPG games where you can get like right in about it and there's lots of quests and skills to build. I think anything like that we really like. Or trains. Like, I love trains. And it's my dream is to replace, is it Michael Portillo?
Oh yeah.
My dream is to replace him as the next train person on telly who just goes on trains.
Let's make that happen. Let's start the campaign right now. That's brilliant.
I love a train. I like sit and look at pictures of trains in foreign lands and I'm like, look at that beautiful big yellow train. And it's my favourite thing. And I don't know why, but I love Harry Potter. I love Harry Potter. I've been writing Harry Potter fan fiction since I was 17. Novel length, weird stories that I can laugh about now, but when at the time they were written fully in earnest with a very I read them now and there's a lot of things like I can go, oh, that's very autistic, or that's like I can see my autism specifically in relationships where it's like she doesn't like being hugged and I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, there's I love it. Yeah, I don't know.
So for me, one of the things I absolutely love when I'm with the autistic people that we support or other people out and about, I just love the just unbridled enthusiasm and joy that comes from interests or hobbies or activities or whatever. It is just, to me, it's to be admired. I think the enthusiasm and the joy and the sheer delight in these things is just absolutely wonderful to behold. Gordon's got a question. He's sort of teeing it up by saying, at times the difficulties of autism can blind people to the upsides. From your experience, do you think there is an increased recognition of the value that autistic people can bring to many different areas of life?
I think there definitely is, and I think it's just through people talking and being open. And I think that there's definitely an increased knowledge of the value which autistic people bring to everyday life. I think there definitely is. I know there's a lot of debate around sort of like retroactively diagnosing people and why we shouldn't do that, but at the same time, why we should do it. And I kind of don't have a very strong opinion on that. I'm not going to lie, but I think that there's definitely something really good about people like Dan Aykroyd talking about it, or just people in general like Fern Brady talking about it, who is another autistic comedian. We couldn't be more different as people, and I think that's so important to show that it's not just one thing. It's not just one thing, it's all different types of things, and I think that that's great. And the more people get diagnosed, the more people can talk about it, the better, because eventually we'll come to a point where it's not something that doctors, when teenage girls go and say, I think I've got autism, say, well, shut up about that because it'll affect your employability. And that's kind of the dream for me, is to get to a point where no other person has to go to a doctor and be told that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, what we need to make sure, I think, Ashley, is that, the talk around embracing diversity isn't just talk, that it actually translates into action, and that signals to people we've all got a responsibility to check ourselves and adjust the things that we're doing so that people can have, the opportunities that they need and deserve. The campaign started. Ross Parker, BBC Scotland, Ashley has a new series idea. Thank you for being awesome, Ashley. You're a brilliant role model for all us neurofunkies.
Thank you, Ross.
Couldn't argue with that. We're coming towards the end of our time. Just like to get through just even some more comments. I think it's really there's a lot of lovely warmth towards you in the comments, Ashley, and I think that's because you yourself are really warm and delightful. Claire Ritchie is saying, my thing is recognizing patterns definitely helps me with my songwriting and singing. I can sing a song like I know it, which confuses people. So that's
so true. That is so true. And I bet you that helps you learn like so quickly at that pattern recognition. That's very cool.
Yeah. Somebody here who's saying, I think this is about Harry Potter. Jan's saying, I've thought about this a lot. There's this boy who's isolated, then he finds his thing, which is magic and Quidditch, and he is accepted and has valued and he has power. So maybe there's something in that.
I don't know if that's it for me, because the whole Quidditch thing irritated me. He never learned. He just was good at it. That doesn't make any sense. You're not just good at flying a broom when you've literally never flown in your life. It's a stupid concept. You should be praised for just having like magically being able to sit in a stick and then catch a ball.
Well, Ashley, there's been loads of comments, loads of engagement. This has been an absolutely brilliant session for me. You are, as many people have said, you are a great role model, and your way of expressing who you are and how you are, I think, just really resonates with so many people who've been tuning in, and really appreciate your time today. And I hope the evil COVID leaves you. Although the sexy COVID might not be so bad, but the evil COVID, let's get rid of that. And thank you so much for spending your time with us. And I know that from the comments, people have had a lot out of it. So thanks a million, Ashley.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to all the people for the lovely things that they said. It was very appreciated.
That's great. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. And we'll hopefully see Ashley on again. I definitely want to have Ashley back. But if there's anybody you would like us to ask along to Facebook Live, then please send us your suggestions. But until next time, take care, everybody, and stay safe. Thanks.